The thunderous hoofbeats pounded the dry earth as Delilah Armstrong's heart threatened to burst from her chest. Her wedding dress, once pristine white, was now caked with dust and torn at the hem, the veil long since abandoned somewhere miles back. Behind her, the shouts of men grew fainter, but the terror in her soul remained at full volume. Freedom beckoned ahead, but at what cost? In the vast expanse of the Arizona Territory, 1885, a woman alone was as good as dead. Delilah's mare began to falter. Its breathing labored after the punishing pace she'd demanded since fleeing the church in Tucson 3 hours earlier. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and her parched throat ached for water. She'd been too panicked to grab provisions, armed only with the small derringer hidden in her boot and whatever money she'd hastily stuffed into her bodice before bolting from the dressing room. "Just a little further, girl," Delilah whispered to the exhausted horse. "We can't let him find us." The image of Byron Whittaker's face flashed through her mind not as the charming businessman who had courted her father's approval, but as the cold-eyed stranger she discovered him to be when she overheard his plans the night before the wedding. Plans that involved her father's land, his debts, and what would become of his troublesome daughter once the marriage was sealed. Dark clouds gathered on the western horizon, promising a storm that would erase her tracks but might claim her life if she couldn't find shelter. The rolling hills gave way to rougher terrain, and the mare stumbled on loose rocks. Delilah pulled back on the reins, knowing she'd pushed the animal beyond its limits. As the first fat raindrops began to fall, she spotted a thin plume of smoke rising from beyond a copse of cottonwoods. Civilization, or at least the promise of it. But would it mean safety or greater danger? With little choice, she guided her exhausted mount toward the smoke. The rain intensified, plastering her dress to her skin and sending rivulets of water down her face. By the time the small cabin came into view, Delilah was shivering violently, her fingers numb around the reins. A man emerged from the cabin, rifle in hand. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a weathered Stetson that shaded his features. Delilah's heart sank. Another man, another threat. Her hand moved instinctively toward her boot and the small gun concealed there. "Madam," the man's voice carried over the rain, "you look like you could use some help." Delilah hesitated, weighing her options. The mare swayed beneath her, ready to collapse. "I won't harm you," he added, lowering his rifle and propping it against the cabin wall. "But that horse needs rest, and you look half drowned." "I'm just passing through," Delilah called back, her voice hoarse from thirst and fear. The man approached slowly, hands raised to show he meant no threat. As he drew closer, Delilah could make out his features, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, keen green eyes that assessed her situation, and a mouth set in a concerned line. "Name's Everett Ingram," he said. "And unless I miss my guess, you're running from something fierce to be out in this weather in a wedding dress." Delilah stiffened. "My affairs are my own, Mr. Ingram. Fair enough." He reached for the mare's bridle. "But your horse is done in, and night's coming. Storm's set to worsen too. I'm offering a dry place to wait it out, nothing more." Thunder cracked overhead as if to emphasize his point. The mare jerked nervously, and Delilah nearly lost her seat. "I have nothing to offer in payment," she admitted, pride warring with practicality. Everett's expression softened. "Wasn't asking for payment, just seems the Christian thing to do." After another moment's hesitation, Delilah nodded once. Everett helped her dismount, her legs nearly buckling as they hit solid ground. He led her and the mare to a small but sturdy barn attached to the cabin. Inside, he quickly set about caring for the exhausted animal while Delilah stood dripping and uncertain. "There's a blanket on that hook," he said, nodding toward the barn wall. "Wrap up in it while I tend to your horse, then we'll get you inside where it's warm." Delilah eyed the offered blanket suspiciously. Noticing her hesitation, Everett paused in his work. "Miss, I don't know what you're running from, and you don't have to tell me. But right now, you have a choice. Trust me enough to accept a dry blanket and a warm fire, or ride that horse to death and possibly yourself with it." His eyes met hers directly. "Choose peace, at least for tonight. Tomorrow you can decide what comes next." Something in his steady gaze and the honest timbre of his voice reached through Delilah's fear. She crossed to the wall and took down the rough woolen blanket, wrapping it around her shoulders. "Thank you," she murmured. "You're welcome." He paused expectantly. "Delilah," she supplied after a moment. "Delilah Armstrong, Miss Armstrong." He nodded respectfully before turning back to the mare. "Your horse will be fine after some rest and care. She's a good animal." "She's the only thing I have left," Delilah admitted quietly. Everett worked in silence for a few minutes, removing the saddle and bridle, rubbing the mare down with dry cloths, and setting out fresh hay and water. His movements were efficient but gentle, and Delilah found herself relaxing incrementally as she watched him. "Cabin's not much," he said when he'd finished, "but it's dry and warm. I've got coffee brewing and stew on the stove." "Why are you helping me?" Delilah asked abruptly. Everett considered her question. "Because you need it," he finally said, "and because I've been on both sides of that need." Before she could respond, he gestured toward the cabin door. "After you, Miss Armstrong." The cabin's interior was spare but neat, a far cry from the filthy bachelor quarters Delilah had expected. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, casting flickering light across simple wooden furniture. Herbs hung drying from ceiling beams, and books lined a small shelf beside the single bed. "Take the chair by the fire," Everett instructed, moving to the pot-bellied stove in the corner. "I'll pour you some coffee. It'll warm you from the inside." Delilah sank gratefully into the chair, the heat from the fire beginning to thaw her chilled limbs. When Everett handed her a steaming mug, she wrapped her fingers around it, savoring the warmth before taking a cautious sip. "It's good," she said, surprised. "One thing a man learns to make proper when he lives alone." Everett stirred the pot on the stove. "Stew's nearly ready, nothing fancy, just venison and whatever vegetables I could coax from the ground." Delilah watched him move about the small space with practiced ease. "You live here alone." 4 years now." He ladled stew into 2 bowls. "Came west after the war, tried my hand at several things before settling here to raise horses." "You're a horse breeder, starting to be." He handed her a bowl and spoon. "Got 6 good mares and a stallion that cost me nearly everything I had. But they're producing fine foals that the Army's interested in." Delilah tasted the stew and couldn't hold back a small sound of appreciation. After hours of hard riding with nothing to eat, the simple meal tasted better than any fancy dinner she'd ever had in Tucson society. "You want to talk about why you're fleeing your own wedding?" Everett asked, settling in the chair opposite her. "Or is that still your affair alone?" Delilah's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "How did you know it was my wedding day?" "Well, the dress gave me a hint," he said with the ghost of a smile. "And you've got flowers still tangled in your hair." Her hand flew self-consciously to her head, where indeed a few bedraggled orange blossoms remained pinned to her tangled curls. "I wasn't fleeing the wedding so much as the groom," she admitted after a moment. "I discovered he isn't the man I thought he was." Everett nodded, his expression careful. "Men often aren't. This one particularly so." Delilah set her bowl aside, appetite suddenly diminished. "He only wanted my father's ranch, and once he had it legally through marriage, he planned to send me away to an asylum, said I was unstable." The words tasted bitter on her tongue. Everett's gaze sharpened. "That's a serious accusation." "I heard him discussing it with his business partner last night." Delilah twisted her hands in the blanket. "My father died 2 months ago, leaving substantial debts. Byron Whittaker appeared like a savior, offering to pay everything if I'd marry him. He seemed kind, charming even. Father had arranged the match just before he died. But he wasn't what he seemed. No." Delilah looked into the fire. "He wants to expand his mining operations onto our land. There's a water source on our property that's essential for his plans. The only legal way to acquire it was through me. And once you overheard his true intentions, I couldn't go through with it." She met his eyes defiantly. "I'd rather die free than live imprisoned for another man's greed." Everett studied her for a long moment. "You're very brave, Miss Armstrong." "Not brave," she corrected. "Desperate." "Sometimes they're the same thing." He rose and took her empty coffee mug. "You need rest. You can take the bed. I'll sleep by the fire." Delilah tensed. "Mr. Ingram, I said I'll sleep by the fire," he repeated firmly. "You have my word as a gentleman that you're safe here." Despite her exhaustion, Delilah remained uncertain. How do I know I can trust your word? You don't, he acknowledged, but I've given you no reason to distrust it either. Sometimes faith is all we have to go on. Too tired to argue further, Delilah allowed him to show her to the small but clean bed in the corner. He provided her with a worn but soft nightshirt. It's not fancy, but it's dry, he said. I'll step outside while you change. When he returned, Delilah was already beneath the blankets, her wedding dress draped over a chair to dry. Everett banked the fire, spread his bedroll on the floor nearby, and extinguished all but one small lamp. Sleep well, Miss Armstrong, he said quietly. You're safe tonight. Despite her fears and the strangeness of her situation, Delilah felt her eyelids growing heavy. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Everett Ingram's tall figure silhouetted against the dying firelight, a silent sentinel against the storm that continued to rage outside. Morning came with startling brightness, sunlight streaming through the cabin's small windows to paint golden patterns across the rough-hewn floor. Delilah woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was and how she'd come to be there. The events of the previous day came rushing back, along with the stark reality of her situation. She was alone in the cabin. Sitting up quickly, she spotted a note propped against a mug on the table beside the bed. Gone to tend the horses. Coffee's hot. Help yourself to breakfast. E.I. Delilah dressed quickly in her now dry wedding dress, grimacing at its sorry state. The once beautiful gown was travel-stained and torn in several places, the delicate lace edging ripped beyond repair. Still, it was the only clothing she had. After drinking the coffee and eating a few bites of the cornbread left on the stove, she ventured outside. The morning was crisp and clean, the storm having washed everything to a pristine brightness. The cabin sat in a small valley, with hills rising gently on all sides. Beyond the barn where she'd first met Everett, she could see fenced paddocks containing several horses. Delilah followed the sound of voices and found Everett in conversation with an older man beside one of the corrals. Both turned as she approached, and Everett straightened, removing his hat. "Miss Armstrong," he greeted her. "Hope you slept well." "I did, thank you," she nodded politely to the stranger. "This is Samuel Jenkins," Everett introduced. "My nearest neighbor, though that's still 5 miles west. Sam, this is Miss Delilah Armstrong." The older man tipped his hat. "Madam. Pleased to meet you, though I admit I'm surprised to find Ev with a lady caller." Delilah flushed, aware of how the situation must appear. "Miss Armstrong was caught in the storm yesterday," Everett explained smoothly. "I offered shelter." Sam's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Always the gentleman, our Everett." He turned back to Delilah. "You heading to Springerville, madam? Not much between here and there." Delilah faltered, realizing she had no clear destination in mind. She'd fled Tucson with no plan beyond escape. "Miss Armstrong hasn't decided her plans yet," Everett interjected. "The storm disrupted her journey." Sam nodded, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Well, I'll be heading that way tomorrow if you need escort, taking some supplies to town." "Thank you," Delilah said quietly. "I'll consider it." After Sam departed, Everett led Delilah to where her mare was contentedly grazing in a small paddock. The animal looked remarkably recovered after its ordeal. "She's a sturdy little thing," Everett commented. "Good bloodlines, you raised her." Delilah nodded, stroking the mare's velvet nose. "Since she was a foal, her name is Penny." She glanced sideways at her host. "Thank you for caring for her. It's what I do." He leaned against the fence post. "So what are your plans, Miss Armstrong?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I can't go back to Tucson. Byron will be looking for me." "This Byron, he's not the type to give up easily. No, he's powerful and vindictive, and I've humiliated him publicly." Everett considered this. "Sam's offer of escort to Springerville is good. It's a growing town, might be work there for a capable woman." "And what makes you think I'm capable, Mr. Ingram?" There was a hint of challenge in her voice. "A woman who'd rather risk death than submit to a false marriage." He raised an eyebrow. "I'd wager you're more capable than most." Delilah turned back to Penny, unsure how to respond to the unexpected compliment. "I should leave today. I've imposed on your hospitality enough. You haven't imposed, and there's no need to rush off half-prepared." Everett gestured toward the cabin. "Come inside." I might have some clothes that could serve you better than that dress for traveling. Inside, he rummaged through a trunk and produced a worn but clean shirt, a pair of trousers, suspenders, and a jacket that had seen better days. My brother's, he explained. He stayed with me a while back. Left these when he moved on. They'll be big on you, but better than riding in that torn finery. Delilah accepted the clothes, touched by the unexpected kindness. Your brother, is he nearby? A shadow crossed Everett's face. No, Thomas died 2 years ago, pneumonia. I'm sorry, she said softly. I know what it's like to lose family. Thank you. He cleared his throat. I'll step out while you change. Alone, Delilah shed the ruined wedding dress with a mixture of regret and relief. It had been beautiful, once a gift from her mother before she passed. But now it represented everything she was fleeing: false promises and a future built on lies. The men's clothing felt strange against her skin, but the practicality was undeniable. She rolled the sleeves and trouser legs, secured everything with the suspenders, and found herself surprisingly comfortable. Looking down at herself, she couldn't help a small, wry laugh. What would the ladies of Tucson society think if they could see Delilah Armstrong now? When Everett returned, he stopped short at the sight of her. For a moment, an unreadable expression crossed his face. Is something wrong? She asked, suddenly self-conscious. No, he said quickly. No, it's just, you look different. Like a boy, you mean? His mouth quirked. No, madam, no one would mistake you for a boy. He cleared his throat again. But the clothes will serve you better on the trail. Something in his gaze made Delilah's cheeks warm. She busied herself with rolling up the sleeves more securely. I want to pay you, she said. For the clothes, the food, the shelter. That's not necessary. It is to me. She met his eyes squarely. I have some money, not much, but enough to compensate you fairly. Everett shook his head. Keep your money, Miss Armstrong. You'll need it more than I will. I won't be a charity case. Her chin lifted stubbornly. He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right. You can help me with the horses this afternoon. Sam's interested in a mare I've been training, but she needs exercise before he sees her. You said you know horses, show me. Delilah's relief was immediate. Gladly. They spent the afternoon in the corral with a spirited bay mare. Delilah demonstrated her skill with horses, earning an appreciative nod from Everett as she worked the animal through various gaits and commands. Your father taught you well, he commented as she brought the mare to a perfect halt beside him. Actually, our ranch foreman did, Delilah corrected, patting the horse's sweaty neck. My father was more interested in cattle than horses, but I always preferred the stables. It shows. Everett took the reins from her. You have a way with them. As they walked back to the barn, Delilah found herself studying her host more carefully. In the bright afternoon light, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, marks of both laughter and hardship. His hands, though strong and calloused from work, handled the horses with gentle expertise. There was nothing of Byron Whittaker's polished artifice about him. Everett Ingram was a man who lived honestly in his own skin. How long have you been in Arizona territory? She asked as they unsaddled the mare. 7 years. Came west after serving with the Union in '65, tried mining in Colorado, drove cattle in Texas, finally settled here 4 years back. He hung the saddle on its rack. Wanted something that was mine, something I built rather than just worked for. And you chose horses. Horses chose me, more like. His smile transformed his face, softening the weathered features. Always had a way with them, even as a boy in Ohio. Seems natural to build a life around what you're good at. That's a luxury many don't have, Delilah observed. Especially women. Everett considered this. True enough, but you seem determined to forge your own path, luxury or not. I have little choice now. She brushed stray hairs from her face. Whatever life I had in Tucson is gone. Sometimes loss is the beginning of something better. He spoke the words quietly, almost to himself. As evening approached, they prepared a simple meal together. Delilah insisted on cooking, proving herself surprisingly adept in the small kitchen space. My mother believed a lady should know how to run a household, regardless of whether we had servants, she explained as she expertly seasoned the rabbit Everett had provided. She'd be mortified to see me in trousers, but pleased I remembered her cooking lessons. She sounds like a wise woman. She was, Delilah's movements slowed. I miss her still, though it's been 5 years since the fever took her. And your father, you said he died recently? 2 months ago, heart failure. She resumed her preparations. We were never close, especially after Mother died. He became harder. More focused on the ranch, on legacy and money than on anything else. Including you, Delilah paused. Yes, I think he saw me primarily as a way to secure the ranch's future, hence the arrangement with Byron. Did you agree to the marriage willingly? I thought I did. She stirred the pot with more force than necessary. Byron courted me properly. He was charming, attentive, father approved, it seemed, sensible, but not passionate, Everett observed, Delilah's cheeks colored. That's hardly an appropriate topic. Forgive me. He raised his hands in apology. I've lived alone too long. My manners have suffered. She glanced at him, saw the genuine contrition in his expression, and felt her annoyance fade. No, you're right. I respected Byron. I thought we could build a good life together, but I never felt. She struggled for the right word. Alive, Everett suggested softly. Their eyes met across the small space, and something electric passed between them. Delilah looked away first, her heart beating unexpectedly fast. Dinner's ready, she said, her voice not quite steady. They ate by lamplight, the conversation turning to safer topics: the horses, the weather, Everett's plans for expanding his breeding operation. After the meal, he insisted on cleaning up while Delilah rested. You've more than earned your keep today, he said when she protested. That mare hasn't worked that well for me in weeks. Later, as the evening darkened to night, they sat before the fire. Everett offered her a book from his small collection, and Delilah was surprised to discover works by Emerson and Thoreau alongside practical manuals on horse breeding and Arizona agriculture. You're well-read for a horseman, she commented, turning the volume of poetry in her hands. My mother was a schoolteacher, he explained. She believed education was the great equalizer, made sure my brother and I could read and appreciate good writing, even while we were learning to plow and tend animals. She sounds remarkable, she was. His expression grew distant. Died during the war, our farm was in the path of one of Sherman's marches. She refused to leave. I'm sorry, Delilah said softly. You've lost much. Everyone has losses. He stirred the fire. It's what we build from the ashes that matters. They fell into comfortable silence, the only sounds the crackling fire and the occasional whisper of pages turning. Delilah found herself stealing glances at her host, wondering at the strange sense of safety she felt in this cabin with a man she barely knew. After years in her father's house, followed by the brief, alarming courtship with Byron, the simple honesty of Everett's presence was both unfamiliar and deeply comforting. Will you leave tomorrow? Everett asked suddenly. With Sam, Delilah looked up from her book. I should. I've imposed enough. You haven't imposed, he said, echoing his words from earlier. In fact, he hesitated, then continued more carefully. I could use help with the horses. Temporary work until you decide where you're heading next. Delilah stared at him, surprised. Are you offering me employment, Mr. Ingram? I'm offering fair exchange, he corrected. Room, board, and a small wage for honest work. You're good with horses, and I'm short-handed. It would benefit us both. And when Byron's men come looking for me, they will, you know. Everett's jaw tightened. This is my land. Anyone who comes here uninvited will answer to me. I don't want to bring trouble to your door. Trouble finds its own way, he said with a slight shrug. And a man who would commit his bride to an asylum for financial gain deserves whatever trouble finds him. Delilah considered his offer. The practical side of her recognized its advantages: safety, time to plan her next move, money to fund it. But beneath that cool assessment stirred something warmer, something that had nothing to do with practicality and everything to do with the man sitting across from her. All right, she said finally. I accept, but only until I have enough saved to move on properly. Everett nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. Good. We'll start tomorrow after Sam leaves. First task is breaking the new colts to saddle. As they prepared for sleep, the same arrangement as the night before, Delilah found herself wondering if she'd made a wise decision. Not because she feared Everett somehow, instinctively, she knew she was safe with him. But because she was beginning to suspect that leaving this cabin and its owner might prove more difficult than she'd anticipated, the following weeks established a rhythm to their days. Mornings began early, with Everett rising at dawn to start the fire and put coffee on while Delilah prepared breakfast. They worked with the horses through the morning, broke for a midday meal, then returned to the training corrals or other ranch chores until dusk. Delilah proved her worth quickly. Her skill with horses matched Everett's, though their approaches differed. Where he relied on patience and quiet persistence, she showed an intuitive understanding of each animal's temperament, adapting her techniques accordingly. Together, they made remarkable progress with the young stock. "That sorrel filly will fetch twice what I expected at the next army purchase," Everett commented one evening as they sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunset paint the hills gold and crimson. "You've done wonders with her." Delilah smiled, pleased by the praise. "She just needed the right approach, too much spirit for force, not enough confidence for complete freedom. Like someone else I know," Everett remarked with a sidelong glance. She laughed softly. "Perhaps, though I'd like to think I have more sense than a half-wild filly. Only half." His eyes crinkled with amusement. Delilah gave him a mock stern look. "Careful, Mr. Ingram. I'm still deciding whether to put sugar or salt in tomorrow's coffee. It's been a month. Don't you think you might call me Everett by now?" The gentle request hung between them, carrying more weight than its simple words suggested. Delilah studied him in the fading light, this man who had offered her sanctuary when she needed it most. "Everett," she said softly, testing the name. It felt right on her lips, as though she'd been meant to speak it. He smiled, and something in his expression made her heart flutter strangely. "Thank you, Delilah." The switch to first names marked a subtle but significant shift in their relationship. Conversations flowed more easily. Silences became comfortable rather than cautious, and they found themselves sharing stories from their pasts that neither had intended to reveal. Delilah told him of her childhood on the ranch outside Tucson, of a mother who'd encouraged her independence and a father who'd gradually withdrawn after his wife's death, focusing on business to the exclusion of his only child. She spoke of her brief time in a ladies' seminary in San Francisco, where she'd learned the social graces expected of a rancher's daughter, but had missed the freedom of Arizona's open spaces. Everett shared tales of his Ohio boyhood, his reluctant enlistment in the Union Army at 18, and the horrors he'd witnessed during those terrible years of war. He spoke of drifting westward afterward, seeking something he couldn't name until he found this valley and knew he'd discovered home. "Did you ever think of marrying?" Delilah asked one night as they sat by the fire, the question slipping out before she could reconsider its propriety. Everett didn't seem offended. "Once. There was a girl in Denver, daughter of a merchant I knew. We courted for a time. What happened? She wanted city life security, society, the things a successful merchant's daughter expects." His voice held no bitterness, only acceptance. "I wanted land, horses, the freedom to build something of my own. We parted amicably enough. Do you regret it, not compromising?" He considered the question seriously. "No, a marriage built on compromise of core values isn't likely to bring happiness to either party. You sound like you speak from experience." "Not my own, my parents'." He stoked the fire thoughtfully. "Father wanted to go west when I was a boy. Mother refused to leave Ohio, her family, the school where she taught. He stayed for her sake but resented it. She knew and carried guilt for it. They loved each other, but there was always that shadow between them." Delilah nodded, thinking of her own parents. "My mother compromised too. She was from Boston originally, educated, cultured. Father's ranch life was entirely foreign to her. She adapted, made a good home, but sometimes I'd find her staring at letters from back east with such longing." "And yet you said they were happy." "Yes," Delilah smiled at the memory. "Despite everything, they truly loved each other. When she died, something vital in my father died with her." "That's the risk, isn't it?" Everett mused. "Loving someone so completely that losing them breaks something essential in yourself. Is it worth it, do you think?" Delilah asked quietly. "That kind of love." Their eyes met across the fire, and the air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities. "I think," Everett said slowly, "that a life without that risk is only half lived. The moment stretched between them, taut with meaning. Then the log in the fireplace cracked loudly, breaking the spell. Delilah rose quickly, murmuring about the lateness of the hour. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay in Everett's bed, which she'd continued to use despite her offers to take the floor instead, listening to his steady breathing from across the room and wondering what was happening to her carefully constructed plans. She had been saving the wages Everett paid her, intending to leave for somewhere far from Tucson as soon as she had enough. Perhaps California or even back east. But as days turned to weeks, the urgency of her escape had gradually been replaced by something else, a sense of belonging she hadn't felt since her mother's death. Working alongside Everett, she'd rediscovered joy in simple things. The satisfaction of a day's honest labor, the quiet pleasure of shared meals, the easy companionship of someone who valued her skills and respected her mind. The rustic cabin had begun to feel like home in a way her father's grand ranch house never had, and Everett himself. Delilah rolled onto her side, facing the wall. She couldn't deny the truth any longer. She was falling in love with him. The realization should have frightened her. After Byron's betrayal, she'd sworn never to trust a man's intentions again. But Everett was nothing like Byron. Where Byron had been smooth flattery concealing calculation, Everett was straightforward honesty occasionally softened by unexpected gentleness. Where Byron had sought to possess her, Everett seemed content simply to know her. But did he feel anything beyond friendship and professional respect? Sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. Other times, he maintained such careful distance that she wondered if she'd imagined the connection between them. Dawn found her still awake, no closer to resolving her confusion. She rose early and was already preparing breakfast when Everett emerged from his bedroll. "You're up early," he observed, pouring coffee for them both. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted, thinking about leaving. There was careful neutrality in his voice. No, the denial came too quickly. She moderated her tone. "That is, I haven't made any definite plans yet." He nodded, and she thought she detected relief in his expression. "Good. The Army buyers are coming next week. Could use your help with the final preparations." "Of course." They worked side by side through the morning, exercising the horses selected for the Army's inspection. Around midday, as they were cooling down the animals, a cloud of dust on the horizon signaled riders approaching. Everett's hand moved instinctively to the rifle he kept nearby when working outdoors. "Were you expecting Sam today?" Delilah shook her head, sudden dread pooling in her stomach. "No." As the riders drew closer, she could make out 4 men. Her blood ran cold as she recognized the lead rider, Byron Whitaker himself, immaculate in a tailored riding coat despite the dusty trail. Beside him rode his foreman, Martinez, and 2 rough-looking men she didn't recognize. "Get inside," Everett said quietly, his eyes never leaving the approaching riders. "No," Delilah squared her shoulders. "This is my fight." "Delilah, I won't hide," she insisted. "Not anymore." Everett's jaw tightened, but he nodded once. Together they stood their ground as the riders approached the corral fence and reined to a stop. Byron's gaze fixed on Delilah, his handsome face a mask of cold fury. "So this is where you've been hiding, my dear." His eyes flicked to Everett, then back to her, taking in her men's clothing with visible distaste. "How very pastoral." "What do you want, Byron?" Delilah asked, proud that her voice remained steady. "Is that any way to greet your fiancé?" Byron's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've come to take you home, of course. Your disappearance has caused quite the scandal. People are concerned." "We both know the only thing you're concerned about is my father's land," Delilah replied coldly. "And I'm no longer your fiancé. I made that clear when I left." Byron's expression hardened. "You're overwrought, Delilah. The strain of your father's death, the wedding preparations, it's affected your mind. The doctor agrees you need rest and proper care." "The only thing affecting her mind is your lies," Everett interjected, his voice quiet but carrying clear authority. "You're trespassing on my property, Mr. Whitaker. I suggest you state your business plainly or leave." Byron turned his attention to Everett, sizing him up with obvious contempt. "And you are, Everett Ingram. This is my ranch." Well, Mr. Ingram, you're harboring my fiancé against her will. I'm afraid that constitutes kidnapping in these parts. Delilah stepped forward. That's a lie. I came here of my own free will, and I've stayed the same way. Of course you'd say that, my dear. Byron's tone dripped with false sympathy. Your confused state makes you particularly vulnerable to influence. His gaze slid meaningfully to Everett. Delilah felt rage building in her chest. I heard you, Byron, the night before our wedding. I heard what you planned to do to me after we were married. A flash of uncertainty crossed Byron's face before his composure returned. I don't know what you think you heard, but clearly it was a misunderstanding. You told James Harrington that you'd have me declared mentally unfit once you had legal control of my father's property, Delilah said, her voice rising. You laughed about how easy it would be to convince people that grief had unhinged me. You had already selected the asylum in California where you'd send me. Byron's expression darkened. You shouldn't eavesdrop on men's business conversations, Delilah. It leads to misinterpretations. There was nothing to misinterpret, she shot back. You made your intentions perfectly clear. Enough, Byron nodded to his men. Martinez, help Miss Armstrong onto her horse. We're taking her home. The foreman moved to dismount, but Everett stepped forward, rifle now raised. The lady stays here if that's what she wants, he said quietly. I won't ask again. Leave my property. Byron's face flushed with anger. 4 against 1, Mr. Ingram. Those aren't favorable odds. I like them just fine, Everett replied evenly. First man to make a move gets a bullet. I was a sharpshooter in the Union Army. Care to test how much of that skill I've retained? For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Byron gave a cold laugh. Very dramatic, Mr. Ingram, but unnecessary. If Delilah wants to play at being a farm girl for a while longer, so be it. His gaze returned to Delilah, calculating. The law is on my side, my dear. Your father signed a contract. The ranch passes to me upon our marriage. Since you've broken the engagement, those debts will come due. Without me, you'll lose everything. I'd rather lose the ranch than my freedom, Delilah replied steadily. We'll see if you still feel that way when you're penniless. Byron gathered his reins. Enjoy your rustic interlude, Delilah. When reality intrudes, you know where to find me. He tipped his hat with mocking courtesy. Mr. Ingram. With that, he wheeled his horse and rode away, his men following. Delilah watched them go, her heart hammering in her chest. Only when they were dots on the horizon did she allow her shoulders to slump, the tension draining from her body. Everett lowered his rifle. Are you all right? She nodded, not trusting her voice. He'll be back, Everett said quietly. Men like that don't give up easily. I know. Delilah took a deep breath. But neither do I. Everett studied her for a long moment, something like admiration in his eyes. No, you certainly don't. He hesitated, then added, what he said about the contract, the debts, is that true? Yes. Delilah sighed heavily. Father mortgaged the ranch to expand our cattle operation. The venture failed, and he died before he could recover financially. Byron agreed to assume the debts in exchange for marriage. And without that agreement, the bank will foreclose. It's only a matter of time. She looked up at him, determination hardening her features. But I meant what I said. I'd rather lose everything than be under Byron's control. Everett nodded slowly. Come on, we should finish with the horses. They returned to work, but the encounter had cast a shadow over the day. That evening, Delilah was unusually quiet, her thoughts clearly troubled. After dinner, Everett brought out a bottle of whiskey he kept for medicinal purposes, pouring small measures for each of them. To steady the nerves, he explained, handing her a glass. Delilah accepted it gratefully, taking a small sip and feeling the liquor burn a warm path to her stomach. Thank you for everything today. I didn't do much, he replied. You stood your ground admirably. You were ready to face 4 armed men for me, she said softly. That's not nothing, Everett. He looked into his glass. It was the right thing to do. Was it? She set her drink aside. Or have I dragged you into a conflict that isn't yours? Byron won't forget this. He's a vindictive man with money and influence. I'm not easily intimidated. Everett's voice was calm, and I've faced worse than an angry businessman and his hired guns. Still, I've brought trouble to your door. Perhaps I should leave, find somewhere else. Is that what you want? He looked up at her, his gaze direct. To leave, Delilah hesitated, the truth hovering on her lips. No, she finally admitted, but I don't want to be responsible for any harm that comes to you because of me. Delilah. Everett set his glass down and leaned forward, his expression earnest. From the moment I offered you that blanket in the barn, I made a choice. I don't regret it, not for a second. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why did you help me that day? Why have you continued to help me? He was silent for a long moment, considering her question with the same thoughtful care he gave to everything. At first, it was simple decency. You needed help, I could provide it. He paused, his eyes meeting hers. But now it's because the thought of you leaving fills me with a dread I can't quite explain. Delilah's breath caught. Everett, you don't have to say anything, he said quickly. I'm not asking for promises or declarations. I just want you to know that whatever comes, whatever you decide, you have a place here. With me, if you want it. The simple sincerity of his words touched something deep within her. For so long, she'd been a piece in other people's games, her father's ambitions, Byron's schemes. But Everett offered something entirely different, the freedom to choose to stay or go as her heart dictated. I do want it, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the crackling fire. I want to stay. Everett's eyes widened slightly, as though he hadn't expected her answer. Are you certain? With Byron's threats hanging over you, I've spent too much of my life letting fear dictate my choices, Delilah interrupted. I'm tired of running, Everett, tired of looking over my shoulder. She took a deep breath. Whatever comes, I want to face it here, with you. The words hung between them, charged with meaning. Everett rose from his chair and crossed to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. Delilah, he said softly, I need to be honest with you. These weeks with you have been, I've never. He struggled to find the words, then simply said, I care for you, more than I thought possible. Her heart soared at the admission. I care for you too. His hands tightened around hers. If you stay, people will talk. A single woman living with a man who isn't her kin, it won't be viewed kindly. I stopped caring about people's opinions when I ran from my own wedding, she replied with a small smile. Besides, I'm your employee, am I not? Perfectly respectable. Is that all you want to be? Everett asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper. My employee, Delilah's pulse quickened. She looked into his eyes, seeing the question there, the hope, the uncertainty. With slow deliberation, she freed one hand from his grasp and brought it to his cheek, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. No, she answered softly, not just your employee. Everett turned his face into her palm, pressing a gentle kiss to the center. The tender gesture sent a shiver through her entire body. Delilah, he murmured, her name a reverent prayer on his lips. May I kiss you? In answer, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that began softly, a tentative exploration, before deepening into something more urgent, more needful. His arms encircled her, drawing her closer, and she melted into his embrace, all thoughts of Byron, the ranch, the future dissolving in the heat of this perfect moment. When they finally parted, both breathless, Everett rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since I found you in that storm, he confessed. Delilah laughed softly, even in that bedraggled wedding dress, especially then. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You looked like a warrior queen, defiant even in defeat. I wasn't defeated, she corrected, just redirected. His smile warmed her to her core. Indeed you were, right to my doorstep. That night, for the first time, Everett didn't sleep on the floor by the fire. Instead, he shared the small bed with Delilah, holding her close as they talked far into the night of hopes, fears, dreams long deferred. Nothing more than kisses and tender embraces passed between them, but the simple intimacy of sleeping in each other's arms felt more profound than any physical passion might have been. In the morning, Delilah woke to find Everett watching her, his expression soft with wonder. What are you thinking? She asked, voice husky with sleep. That I never expected to find something so precious in the middle of a storm, he replied, brushing his lips against her forehead. The days that followed took on a new sweetness. They continued their work with the horses, preparing for the army buyers, but now their partnership extended beyond the corrals. Stolen kisses punctuated the day's labor. Hands lingered in casual touches, Conversations delved deeper into hopes for the future they were beginning to envision together. The army buyers came as scheduled, purchasing 4 of Everett's horses for a sum that exceeded his expectations. That evening, as they celebrated the successful sale, he presented Delilah with a small leather pouch. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to find a substantial amount of money. "Your share," Everett explained. "You helped train those horses, you deserve part of the profit." Delilah stared at the money, then back at him. "Everett, this is too much. It's fair," he insisted, "and I thought you might have use for it." She understood his meaning immediately. With this money, combined with her savings, she could pay off at least some of her father's debts, perhaps negotiate with the bank for time to settle the rest. It wasn't enough to save the ranch outright, but it was a start. "I can't accept this," she began, but Everett shook his head. "You earned it, Delilah, and I've been thinking about what Whitaker said, about the ranch." She tensed slightly. "What about it? It's your home," Everett said simply. "Your heritage. I know what it means to have land that's been in your family, to feel connected to it." "It hasn't felt like home since Mother died," Delilah admitted. "And now, with everything that's happened." She looked around the small cabin, at the simple space that had become more dear to her than the grand ranch house where she'd grown up. "This feels more like home now." Everett's expression softened. "Does it?" "Yes," she reached for his hand. "Because you're here." He brought her fingers to his lips. "I've been thinking, the breeding operation is doing well better than I expected with this army contract. We could expand, perhaps look for larger property." Delilah's heart skipped. "What are you saying, Everett?" He took a deep breath, as though gathering courage. "I'm saying that perhaps there's a way to save your ranch and build something new together. A partnership of sorts." "A partnership," she repeated, watching his face carefully. "What kind of partnership?" Everett met her gaze squarely. "The kind that lasts a lifetime, if you're willing." Delilah's breath caught as she realized what he was proposing. "Everett Ingram, are you asking me to marry you?" "Not very gracefully," he admitted with a rueful smile. "But yes." "I love you, Delilah. These weeks with you have shown me what I was missing all those years alone. I want to build a life with you, whether it's here, at your ranch, or somewhere entirely new." Tears pricked Delilah's eyes. "But we've known each other such a short time." "Sometimes a few weeks tells you more than years could," he replied. "I know your courage, your determination, your heart. I know how you speak to horses in that soft voice when you think no one's listening. I know you hum when you cook, and that you can't abide coffee without sugar." His hands tightened around hers. "I know I love you, and that won't change whether you say yes today or ask me to wait." Delilah studied his face, the earnest green eyes, the strong features that had become so dear to her, the honesty that radiated from his very being. Here was a man who had offered her a blanket and peace when she was at her lowest, who had seen her strength when she felt weakest, who had given her choices when others sought to take them away. "Yes," she whispered, her heart full to bursting. "Yes, I'll marry you, Everett." Joy transformed his face. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally parted, he pressed his forehead to hers. "We'll face whatever comes together," he promised. "Byron, the bank, whatever challenges arise. Together," she agreed. The challenges came sooner than either expected. 3 days later, Sam Jenkins arrived with news from Springerville. "Whitaker's been asking questions all over town," he reported as they sat at Everett's table, "offering rewards for information about Miss Armstrong's whereabouts." He glanced apologetically at Delilah. "Everyone knows she's here, of course. Hard to keep secrets in a place this size." "Has he made any specific threats?" Everett asked, his expression grim, not outright, but he's hired men rough sorts from down Tucson Way, 4, maybe 5 of them. Sam shifted uncomfortably. "Word is he's filing papers claiming Miss Armstrong isn't of sound mind, seeking legal guardianship." Delilah paled. "He can't do that. With enough money and influence, a man can do almost anything in these parts," Sam said sadly. "Especially against a woman with no family to speak for her." Everett's jaw tightened. "She has me." "That's just it, son. The way Whitaker tells it, you've compromised Miss Armstrong's virtue, using her vulnerable state to your advantage." Delilah rose from her chair, outraged. "That's absurd." "Everett has been nothing but honorable." "I believe you, miss," Sam assured her, but Whitaker's spinning quite the tale in town, says he's concerned for your welfare, that this rancher has filled your head with fancies to get his hands on your property. The irony, Delilah muttered bitterly. There's more, Sam continued reluctantly. He's bringing the sheriff out tomorrow, says he has witnesses to prove his claims. Everett stood, his expression resolute. Then we need to move quickly. He turned to Delilah. How soon can you be ready to travel? She blinked, surprised. Travel where? Springerville, to get married. His eyes held her steadily. If you still want to, understanding dawned. As his wife, she would have legal protection against Byron's claims. Everett would have the right to speak for her, to defend her interests. Yes, she said without hesitation. I still want to. Sam cleared his throat. Reverend Phillips could perform the ceremony. His wife would stand witness. If you came now, we could have it done before nightfall. Delilah looked down at her borrowed men's clothing, a smile tugging at her lips despite the gravity of the situation. Not exactly how I imagined my wedding day. Everett took her hands. We can wait, do this properly later if you prefer. But legally, no, she interrupted. No more waiting. She squeezed his fingers. I'll change into my dress. The wedding dress, Everett asked, surprised. Delilah laughed. Hardly, it's in tatters, but I do have one decent dress I bought in town last month. Her expression grew serious. Everett, are you certain about this? Byron won't stop. He could make life very difficult for both of us. I've never been more certain of anything, he replied without hesitation. I love you, Delilah. I want to marry you not just for legal protection, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it. The simple sincerity of his words touched her deeply. I love you too, she whispered. They rode to Springerville with Sam, Delilah now properly attired in a simple blue dress. The small town was bustling with afternoon activity, and she felt eyes following them as they made their way to the modest church at the edge of town. Reverend Phillips was a kind-faced man who listened to their situation with sympathy. Ordinarily, I prefer to know a couple better before joining them in matrimony, he said, but Sam vouches for you, Mr. Ingram, and these circumstances are indeed pressing. He looked at Delilah. Are you entering this union of your own free will, Miss Armstrong? I am, she answered firmly. With all my heart. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, conducted in the small church with only Sam, Mrs. Phillips, and the Reverend's daughter as witnesses. When Everett slipped a simple gold band onto Delilah's finger, hastily purchased from the town's general store, tears sprang to her eyes. I'll get you a proper ring later, he whispered as they exchanged vows. This is perfect, she assured him, her heart too full for elaborate sentiments. As Reverend Phillips pronounced them husband and wife, Delilah felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. The path that had brought her here had been unexpected and fraught with danger, but standing beside Everett, hearing him promise to cherish and protect her all the days of his life, she knew she had found her true home. They spent their wedding night at Springerville's small hotel, consummating their union with tender passion. In Everett's arms, Delilah discovered depths of feeling she had never imagined possible, a connection that transcended the physical and bound their souls together. Morning came too soon, bringing with it the reality of the challenges they still faced. They rode back to Everett's ranch, their ranch now, to find Sheriff Davis waiting for them. With him was Byron Whitaker, his face a mask of cold fury. Mrs. Ingram, the sheriff greeted Delilah, tipping his hat. Congratulations on your nuptials. Byron's expression darkened at the formal address. This is absurd. She's clearly been coerced. I assure you I have not, Delilah replied calmly, showing her wedding ring. Everett and I were married yesterday by Reverend Phillips, with proper witnesses present. A convenient arrangement, Byron sneered, just in time to circumvent my legal petition. Sheriff Davis sighed heavily. Mr. Whitaker has filed papers claiming Miss Armstrong Mrs. Ingram now is mentally unsound, and that Mr. Ingram has taken advantage of her vulnerable state. That's a lie, Everett stated flatly. Be that as it may, I'm required to investigate such claims, the sheriff continued. However, the fact of your legal marriage does complicate matters considerably. He turned to Delilah. Madam, I need to ask you directly, are you being held here against your will? Has Mr. Ingram exerted any undue influence over you? Absolutely not, Delilah answered firmly. I came to Everett's ranch of my own volition after fleeing an unwanted marriage to Mr. Whittaker. I stayed because I chose to, and I married Everett because I love him. She met Byron's gaze unflinchingly. The only one who has attempted to control me is Mr. Whittaker, who planned to have me committed to an asylum once he had legal control of my father's property. Byron scoffed. Paranoid delusions, you see, Sheriff. This is precisely what concerns me. She's not well. I heard you discussing it with James Harrington the night before our wedding, Delilah countered. You spoke quite openly about your plans for me and for my father's water rights. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Byron's face, quickly masked. Nonsense. James would never corroborate such wild claims. Perhaps not, Delilah agreed, but your conversation wasn't entirely private. My maid, Rosa, was also present, though you didn't notice her. She heard everything as well. This was a calculated bluff. Rosa had indeed been present, but Delilah had no way of knowing if the young woman would be willing to testify against a man as powerful as Byron Whittaker. Still, the momentary flash of alarm in Byron's eyes told her the shot had landed true. Sheriff Davis cleared his throat. Mr. Whittaker, these are serious counter-accusations. Without substantial evidence of Mrs. Ingram's alleged mental instability, and in light of her legal marriage, I'm afraid I can't take any action based on your petition. Byron's face flushed with anger. This isn't over, he hissed, his gaze fixed on Delilah. The bank will foreclose on your father's ranch within the month. You've thrown away your last chance to save it. I'd rather lose land than liberty, Delilah replied steadily, something my father never understood. After the sheriff escorted a fuming Byron from the property, Everett pulled Delilah into his arms. That was impressively handled, Mrs. Ingram, she smiled at the new name. It wasn't entirely a bluff. Rosa was there that night. Whether she'd admit it is another question entirely. We'll cross that bridge if we come to it, Everett assured her. For now, we have more immediate concerns. Those concerns occupied them for the following weeks. As Byron had threatened, the bank moved to foreclose on the Armstrong ranch. However, with the money from the Army horse sale and Delilah's savings, they managed to negotiate an extension, giving them time to develop a plan. After much discussion, they decided to sell most of the cattle operation and convert the Armstrong ranch to horse breeding, combining it with Everett's smaller property. It meant sacrificing some of the land, but would allow them to keep the heart of the ranch, including the precious water rights that had sparked Byron's interest in the first place. Are you sure about this? Everett asked as they rode the boundaries of her family property, now theirs jointly. Your father built this cattle operation from nothing. I'm sure, Delilah replied, gazing across the familiar landscape with new eyes. Father never understood that the ranch was just land valuable, yes, but not worth sacrificing happiness for. Mother taught me that home is where love dwells, not where boundaries are drawn on a map. Everett reached across to take her hand. We'll build something good here, something that honors your family's legacy while creating our own. The transition wasn't easy. They faced resistance from some of the old ranch hands who didn't approve of the changes or of Delilah's unconventional marriage. Byron continued his campaign of subtle harassment, spreading rumors in town and attempting to undermine their business connections. But for every obstacle, they found unexpected allies. Sam Jenkins introduced them to potential buyers for their horses. Rosa, Delilah's former maid, did indeed confirm the conversation she'd overheard, effectively neutralizing Byron's claims about Delilah's mental state. The banker's wife, who had suffered her own troubles with controlling men, advocated for more favorable terms on their loan. Through it all, Delilah and Everett's partnership deepened not just as husband and wife, but as true companions who valued each other's strengths and supported each other through weaknesses. The love that had sparked so unexpectedly during a storm grew steadier and more profound with each passing day. 1 year to the day after their wedding, Delilah stood on the porch of their newly expanded cabin, watching as Everett worked with a spirited young stallion in the corral. Her hand rested on her swelling belly, a secret joy they had only just begun to share with their closest friends. As if sensing her gaze, Everett looked up, his face breaking into the smile that still made her heart skip. He secured the horse and walked toward her, his stride purposeful. "You should be resting," he chided gently as he climbed the steps to join her. "I'm pregnant, not infirm," she replied with mock indignation. "Besides, I enjoy watching you work," he laughed, pulling her into his arms. "Is that so, Mrs. Ingram? And here I thought you married me for my land." "Certainly not," she retorted, eyes twinkling. "It was clearly for your coffee-making skills." Everett's expression softened as he placed a hand over hers on her belly. "1 year," he mused. "Sometimes it feels like we've been together forever. Other times, like that stormy day was just yesterday." "The best kind of forever," Delilah agreed, leaning into his embrace. "One that feels both new and timeless." "Any regrets?" he asked, a question he posed occasionally as though still amazed by their good fortune. Delilah thought of the path that had led her here, the desperate flight from a loveless marriage, the storm that had driven her to Everett's door, the blanket he'd offered along with a choice: peace or continued flight. She thought of the struggles they'd overcome together and the joy they'd found in building a shared dream. "Not one," she answered truthfully, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "Every step, even the painful ones, brought me here, to you, to us." As the sun set behind the distant mountains, painting the Arizona sky in shades of gold and crimson, Delilah Armstrong Ingram stood in the circle of her husband's arms, finally, completely at peace. The journey had been unexpected, fraught with danger and uncertainty, but it had led her to a love more profound than she had ever imagined possible. And in the gentle swell beneath her hand, the promise of their future grew stronger each day, a future built on choice, respect, and a love that had begun with a simple offer of shelter from the storm. 6 years later, the Ingram Ranch had transformed from a struggling venture to one of the most respected horse breeding operations in the Arizona Territory. Their reputation for quality stock had spread beyond the Army to wealthy ranchers throughout the Southwest and as far east as Texas. The small cabin had given way to a proper ranch house, built on the foundation of the old Armstrong home, but designed to Delilah and Everett's specifications, spacious enough for their growing family, but retaining the warmth and intimacy they both cherished. On this particular evening, Delilah stood on the wide front porch, watching as Everett led their 5-year-old son, Thomas, on a gentle pony around the yard. The boy's peals of laughter mingled with the soft cooing of the infant girl nestled in Delilah's arms, Elizabeth, named for Everett's mother, just 3 months old and already showing signs of her father's calm temperament. "Higher, Papa, higher." Thomas called, bouncing excitedly in the small saddle as Everett picked up the pace slightly. "Easy now, Cowboy," Everett cautioned with a smile. "Remember what we talked about: gentle hands, firm seat." Delilah marveled at the tableau before her son, with his father's green eyes and her own stubborn chin, already showing a natural affinity for horses. Her husband, patient and strong, his hair now lightly streaked with silver at the temples, but his body still powerful from daily work. This was the life she had never dared imagine during those dark days in Tucson, when she'd felt trapped by her father's expectations and Byron's deceit. A life built on love freely given and choices made together. Byron Whitaker had eventually abandoned his campaign against them, though not without a final, desperate attempt to ruin their reputation in the territory. His accusations had fallen flat when evidence emerged of his unscrupulous business practices, forcing him to retreat to California in disgrace. The last Delilah had heard, he had married a wealthy widow, there hopefully one more capable of seeing through his charm than she had once been. "Mama, did you see?" Thomas called as Everett lifted him from the pony. "I rode all by myself." "I saw, my brave boy," Delilah assured him as he bounded up the porch steps. "You're becoming quite the horseman." "Like Papa," he declared proudly. "Just like Papa," she agreed, meeting Everett's gaze over their son's head. After settling Thomas with his wooden toys in the parlor and placing Elizabeth in her cradle, Delilah joined Everett on the porch as dusk painted the landscape in soft purple shadows. He handed her a cup of coffee still made to perfection after all these years and slipped an arm around her waist. "Sam brought news from town," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "That parcel of land adjoining our north pasture, the one we've been eyeing for the expanded breeding program. What about it?" Delilah asked, sipping her coffee. "It's available." Everett's fingers traced small circles at her waist. "Owners moving to California needs to sell quickly. Can we afford it?" Their business was prosperous, but expansion always required careful consideration. "With the profits from this year's Army contract, yes," he hesitated. "But it would mean postponing the improvements to the house you wanted." Delilah considered this. She'd been hoping to add a proper music room where Thomas could learn piano as she had as a child. But business had to come first if they were to continue building their legacy. "The house can wait," she decided. "The land is more important for our future." Everett turned her to face him fully. "Are you certain? I know how much that music room means to you." This was what she treasured most about their partnership, the way every decision, large or small, was truly shared. Everett never assumed he knew best, never made unilateral choices about their joint venture. "I'm certain," she assured him. "Besides, Thomas is more interested in horses than harmonies at the moment." Everett smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way she loved. Like his mother. "I'll have you know I was quite accomplished at the piano," Delilah protested with mock indignation. "And yet, given the choice, you were always in the stables." His smile widened. "Why do you think I fell in love with you?" "Here I thought it was my charming conversation and elegant attire," she teased, gesturing to her practical riding skirt and simple blouse. Everett pulled her closer. "It was your courage," he said, his tone shifting to seriousness. "Your refusal to accept anything less than a life lived on your own terms. Even when that life led me to your doorstep, bedraggled and desperate, especially then." He traced the line of her cheek with gentle fingers. "You could have chosen the safe path, married Whitaker, ignored what you'd overheard, accepted the life others had planned for you." "That wouldn't have been safe," Delilah corrected. "It would have been surrender. And you've never been one to surrender." Pride and love mingled in his voice. "Neither have you," she replied softly. "You could have sent me away that night, avoided the trouble I brought to your door. Best trouble that ever found me." Everett leaned down to kiss her, a gesture that still carried the same tender passion as their first embrace. From inside the house came a thin wail, Elizabeth awakening from her nap. Delilah sighed against her husband's lips. "Duty calls," she murmured. "I'll check on Thomas," Everett offered. "He was asking earlier about helping to feed the new foal." As they turned to enter the house, Everett paused, his hand on the small of Delilah's back. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if that storm hadn't driven you to my ranch that day?" Delilah considered the question. "Sometimes. But then, I remember what my mother used to say, that life has a way of leading us exactly where we need to be, even when the path seems darkest." "Wise woman, your mother. She would have liked you," Delilah said with certainty. "She always hoped I'd find someone who saw me clearly not as property or a prize, but as a partner." Everett's expression grew tender. "I see you, Delilah Ingram. I've seen you from the first moment you rode into my yard, defiant even in your fear. And offered me a choice," she finished. "Peace when everything around me was chaos." "Best offer I ever made," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. Together they entered the house, the home they had built, the life they had chosen, the peace they had created together. Outside, the Arizona sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues, a fitting backdrop to the quiet joy of their hard-won happiness. For Delilah, who had once fled a forced marriage with nothing but fear and desperation driving her forward, the journey had led to something beyond her wildest dreams. A man who offered not possession but partnership, not control but choice, not mere security but a love that continued to deepen with each passing year. And in that love, she had found not just peace, but a profound and lasting joy that made every struggle, every fear, every moment of uncertainty worth the path that had brought her home.